Back with Dr. Larry Crabb. The book's called 66 Love Letters, a conversation with God that invites you into his story. And I think that you'd be the first to say, Larry, that as much as we want people to read your new book, your whole purpose is that they'll read the book. Oh. Right?
I've written a study guide for this, and I hope that people get in groups, and that's already happening. And what I strongly encourage is read the book of the Bible before you read this, or read this before you read the book of the Bible, either way, but read the book of the Bible. Yeah. Read the Bible. The Bible's the Word of God. This is some thoughts from Larry.
You also encourage people to do what I didn't do. You encourage people to take their time and read this thing slowly. You know, not to overamp on the book. I had to cram, basically. It was given to me just a few days ago, but I've loved it. We've talked about major prophets like Isaiah, Ezekiel, Jeremiah, just so very briefly. But then there's this bunch of minor prophets. I think there's 12 of them.
Minor only in length.
Minor only in length. Minor only because their volume of work is of lesser volume. There's some really unique guys here. Maybe uniquest, if there's such a word, of all in my book, is Hosea.
Yeah. I was predicting you were going to say that.
I mean, tell us about Hosea. I mean, this is some story.
Well, there's some controversy as to how it all played out, but my understanding of it, and I would not push this to finality, but God comes to Hosea and arranges a marriage with a prostitute. Yeah. And my thought is, this is a marriage made in heaven? Yeah. You gotta be kidding. Yeah. And God, why did you mess up his life by having him marry Gomer of all people? Wasn't there a nice girl sitting around for this wonderful prophet of yours to marry? Well, God had Hosea marry Gomer, and whether she was a prostitute before the marriage or whether it happened afterward, that's up for grabs among scholars. But either way, the marriage didn't go so well. Yeah. And so you have to say, if Romans 8:28 is still in the book, and if it applied even back to Hosea's day, that all things work together for good, what does good mean? It certainly doesn't mean marital bliss in Hosea's case. But what it means is that Hosea was learning something of the character of God so that he could present his prophecy with power. And I don't believe you ever learn what the word love really means, because only Jesus revealed love when he died on the cross. Romans tells us that, or Corinthians tells us that. By this we know that God, what love is. No, it's in 1 John 3, actually. By this we know what love is, that Jesus died for us. And I believe that what happened with Hosea was he learned something about the character of God, that when somebody hurts you as deeply as Gomer hurt him, the way to respond is not to say, the dickens with you, or literally from God's point of view, to hell with you. Yeah. But rather, I'm going to come after you, and I want you, and I'm going to bring you back to myself. There's a marvelous passage in Hosea 11 where God is saying, God is looking at Israel, who was his Gomer, if you will, and God is saying, I don't want you. But then he says, but I'm not like a man, I'm God. And I discover within me, in the pain that you brought me, that my bottom line is not get out of here. My bottom line is, I'm going to come after you. I love you. I can recall when our older son, and I've told this with his permission, but he was a handful when he was a teenager. And I happened to walk into a place where he was in the middle of doing some really bad things when he was about 18 years old. And there was something in me that wanted just to get him out of my life. My pain was so great. But I thought of Hosea, and I thought, I'm not going to give up on my kid. This is my boy. This is my son. Is he breaking my heart? Yeah. Am I hurting in ways that I never thought I'd hurt? Yeah. It was terrible. But I had just a little tiny glimpse of God's pursuit of me. And I pursued my son. I didn't give up on him. And I remember saying to him these words, you can keep me in tears the rest of my life. You have that power. But you don't have the power to make me stop loving you. And that to me is the lesson of Hosea.
And that gets back to the point you were making way back in Genesis, that this really is a love story.
Yes.
And the fulfillment of holiness is to love, to love deeply.
To love deeply. To love like God loves, which is a higher calling. We've all fallen short of that glory.
Yeah. But Hosea loved deeply.
He loved deeply. Marvelous man of power. And it cost him. True love costs. Yeah. Therefore, serial marriage is out.
Yeah. Another really cool guy is Amos. Here you got this shepherd and a fruit picker. He's a rustic. Right. He's got calluses on his fingers. And we don't know if he had much formal education. He's a contemporary of Isaiah. Judah's going and Israel both through a very prosperous time. and he feels called by God from Tekoa, which is just a barren, windswept hill.
You've been there.
Many times.
Yeah.
In fact, when I moved to Jerusalem years ago, one of my first pilgrimages, if you will, was to Tekoa. Because I've always identified with Amos.
Oh, I'm jealous.
He goes up to the northern kingdom and basically lambastes the king and the court, and I mean that's rustic. Take away from me the sound of your music. You who in your solemn assemblies. I'm no interest in your solemn assemblies. You who sell the poor for the price of a pair of sandals.
Yeah. And he called women cows.
Yeah. What's the love letter there?
Next topic.
But really,
I think he's calling us. I think Amos is calling us to true worship. Because the worship that the Jews were engaging in the northern kingdom during times of prosperity wasn't transforming their lives. It was exciting them. A passage I mentioned in one of our earlier conversations, Amos chapter 5, where he said, as the people are going to the mega churches of the day, Bethel, Beersheba, and Gilgal, you stand on the road and tell them not to come. I don't want them to go there. Why? I mean, where was it that Jacob's name was changed to Israel? I think that was
Peniel.
at Peniel.
Was it Peniel? No, it wasn't Peniel.
It was Bethel, I believe.
It was Bethel. You're right. It was Bethel.
It was Bethel.
Peniel was where he had that experience with the
ladders thing. Yeah, right, exactly.
Yeah, and he wrestled with the angel at Bethel.
And I think what he was saying, what God is saying through us, as Amos tells people, don't go to Bethel, is you're not going to Bethel to have your name changed from one who grasps to one who wrestles with God. You're going to Bethel to feel good in the moment. That's not what worship is about. Worship is transformational. Beersheba, where he actually met all three patriarchs. And he said to them, I am with you to accomplish my purposes. But the Jews in that day were going to Beersheba, asking God to be present with them to get their purposes going, of more prosperity and the recession never coming and the stock market zooming and all the rest of it. And then Gilgal is where they first ate the food from the promised land after 40 years of manna. And it was the place where they were circumcised for battle. And I think God is saying, are you recognizing that you want to live the Christian life? You're going to live it in weakness. And then my power is going to be made evident. But you're not coming with that humility at all. I want you to worship transformationally. And if you're not worshiping transformationally, you're not worshiping. Well, I think that's a love letter.
Your buddy Soren Kierkegaard put it very well. He said, mere mental assent to a doctrine is not enough. Where there's no transformation, there's no Christianity.
That's it. Boy, that's perfect.
Malachi is the last book of the Old Testament, the last love letter of the Old Testament, and this is perfect timing because next week we start with the New Testament. Anything in Malachi, in your view, that kind of sets you up for what's coming a few hundred years later?
Well, two things. One is there are 7 times in the book of Malachi where God rebukes the Israelites. And each time, Israel responds by saying, what are you talking about? We don't get it. In other words, they're blind. Right. And so God then shuts his mouth for 400 years after he talks to Malachi. And the Jews still expect that when the Messiah comes, he's going to say, we're going to get rid of Rome and restore you to prosperity. And Jesus comes and says, I have a whole different kingdom involved. And it's going to be a kingdom of changing your heart in a way that the Jews in Malachi didn't understand. But there's a hint in Malachi. In Malachi 3, that little group that remembered the Lord. And God heard and listened. And the word heard actually means that God has attention. So if you're walking away down the hallway away from me and I say, Jim, I get your attention, you turn around, well, that's God. And then listen, the actual Hebrew word, I'm told, you're the scholar, not me, is he puts his ear next to our mouth saying, I don't want to miss a word. Those people who are looking at God as their covenant God, those people who are saying, God, you're everything to me, God says, I will be everything to you. I am everything to you. Wait until you hear what's going to happen in the New Testament. You're going to experience everything I have in mind for you because I'm God and you're my people.
This is why, friends, you're going to want to be with us next week when our conversation continues with Dr. Larry Crabb. This is a fascinating conversation. I'm loving it, and I'm sure you are too. If I'm loving it, you are. I know that's how it works. The book is called 66 Love Letters, a conversation with God that invites you into his story. It's a book that you'll want to get for yourself, and it's a book that is going to really add value to your personal study of the Bible. But don't forget, next week with Dr. Larry Crabb, we start with the New Testament.